Monday, April 1st, quick session recap here, starting off with ES. One of the primary things I'd mentioned this morning during the pre-market prep live stream was the fact that ES could potentially show that failed daily time frame breakout. We were looking at that 53.22 as the key level, the main level of interest for today's session, essentially to establish whether or not buyers could defend the breakout point at 53.22 or whether it was going to be a failed breakout. Now, the old adage is from failed moves comes fast moves in the opposite direction, and that's exactly what we saw today. So you see that 53.22 level of interest failing to hold as support. You get the move down into that near-term volume point of control. There's a little bit of an attempt to bid right through there. That's also the prior day volume point of control, if I remember correctly. But post 10 a.m., price fails to really mark a low, and it just resolves lower. Okay, no real bid at 5,300, and we're down into last week's volume point of control, which is now holding as support during the afternoon. So range trading continues, right? We had an attempt to see price break out right through here. It failed. Now we're just back within last week's range. So these are levels that we should all be quite familiar with, given that we just spent the entirety of the past week trading in this zone. Nothing really all that new here. For tomorrow, what I'll be looking at is how price responds essentially versus this afternoon base. All right, let's take a look at the 5-minute chart here so you get a sense of today's profile. We have that push lower, right? Now we have an afternoon base that is developed. So depending on the overnight action, as always, I want to see how price trades versus this afternoon base. So potentially looking at 5,300 again, or that 52.83 area. We'll see where we open up and how active that overnight session is. But looking for that move outside of this afternoon base. That should give us a solid move, either continuing lower into that near-term range, right, into that support zone, which is going to be down into essentially 52.75, 52.70 area down through here, or this zone, this last week's volume point of control holds as support, and we start to see the bounce rotate up through 5,300 back into that 53.22 area. But as far as right now, this is just a range. Just range trading. So that's ES, pretty straightforward, getting that bid into the close here. Last 10, 15 minutes of the past few sessions have been quite active. You can see this is why we like to look at those afternoon bases. You can see once that base breaks, you get a pretty sizable move, right? Take a look at the 1 minute or the 2 minute, Once that intraday resistance right through here at 52.95 starts to break, you get a expansion move. Unfortunately for buyers, there's resistance right through here in the 5,300 and VWAP area, but that can be a really solid setup, especially if you're positioned somewhere through here, like on one of these higher lows. That can be really, really nice. Take a look at the VWAP rejection this morning in ES. I know some of you caught that play. That was a phenomenal trade. It did require a little bit more patience, but that was a really, really strong trade, so congrats. Let's take a look at NQ. So NQ, what we were looking at for today was this near-term structure, right? I had mentioned the 18,620 as that near-term resistance zone. We wanted to see how price was going to trade versus the 18,500 this morning, because look at what we have. Essentially, Sunday night, you get that momentum move into the near-term resistance. This should not surprise anyone. We know you can just look left on the chart and see that there's resistance there. So price resolves lower, just range trading, doing range things, not all that surprising. Into the 18,500. You do have some buying activity through there. You can see it on the 30-minute. We do have some hammers that develop there. And then if you take a look at the actual intraday action, phenomenal opening drive trade. So I would have been in this. Unfortunately, I was having data issues with my broker, but this was a really clean opening drive trade up through that 18,500 into 18,540 level of interest, but more importantly, up into that 18,620 near-term resistance zone. And then the other item I want to point out here is always remember that 10 a.m. reversal time, right? Price essentially marks the session high right into 10 a.m. Here's 10 a.m. right where my cursor is. So always remember that 10 a.m. reversal time can be really solid. An attempt at a VWAP long right through there does not materialize. You can probably scalp that for a few points, but no follow through. Careful with these, right? Careful with these trades. If you were in this pullback to VWAP in NQ, understand context. This is known resistance. So if you get long here, right, you're doing so with the mentality that, all right, it's probably just going to be a scalp into the highs if you're lucky, because we know that this is all resistance. Ideally, what you want to see in this scenario is price actually breaking above the resistance zone and then VWAP trading higher. Price comes back somewhere near that 18,620 level. VWAP is right near there, and then you can grab the long. This is always going to be a higher risk opportunity. It's a decent trade, don't get me wrong, but it's a higher risk opportunity simply because big picture context shows resistance right up into this area. So that rejects, price resolves lower. Get a move through the session low down into 18,400. Again, just near-term range trading. All right, that's all this is. We have essentially support down through here and then resistance up through this area. So test resistance, you should be expecting selling. Test support, you should be expecting buying. And then you always have some mid-range reference points that can be used. Not the best location, but they definitely can be used, especially this one right through here, 18,500, where the near-term volume point of control is, can be decent. But again, the best opportunities when you're trading within a range are near the edges of the range. So as far as tomorrow on NQ, we'll be looking at 18,500 back here into the middle of the range. Take a look at the daily chart. Not a lot happening here, right? This is just a scalping market. Look at the daily bars. What are you going to do with that? Right? So tight action, overlapping, not gaining any traction. So you either scalp or just stay in cash. Alrighty. 18,500 main level of interest for NQ tomorrow, and then 5,300 on ES. Of course, always depending on what type of overnight action we're going to be seeing, what type of pre-market action we're going to be seeing. No individual names in these scans, so it will be an index-focused day again, unless we have some fresh news in the morning. But that's about it. I hope everyone had a great session. Good start to the month, good start to the week. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot me a DM. Otherwise, I'll see you tomorrow morning for the live stream. Have a good evening.